Welcome back to the Drowned City spoiler wrap-up. I'm rather Incoherent, and today we're covering the last of the leaks for the Rogue class. Let's get started right away with String Along. It is a 3-cost, slotless asset. Reaction: when you attempt to evade an enemy, exhaust String Along. For this evasion attempt, you get +1 skill value, and that enemy gains alert. If you succeed, draw 1 card and do not disengage from that enemy. I feel like this card was made for me, and at the same time, I feel like this card is triggering. I have very mixed feelings on this card. One of my friends in our personal Discord immediately said, if this were a Seeker card, instead of gaining alert, the test would just automatically pass. And that's not that far off the truth. It wouldn't automatically pass, but I'm pretty sure if this were a Seeker card, it wouldn't randomly give the enemy alert. I personally think this line of text just does not need to be there. I'd rather see this card be more expensive in some way and not have the enemy gains alert. That's just like the Rogue flavor of randomly giving a card a crippling downside that makes me double stack. Like, why is this Knuckle Dusters for tripping? It didn't need to be. Now, that said, despite me looking at this and thinking, this is the Rogue tax, this happens to Rogue cards, this card makes me really happy. I have very, very frequently said when it comes to Rogues, tripping as an archetype, foot matters as a thing, often struggles because just boosting up your foot is not that easy to do. When you shoot a gun, you generally get at least +1. When you try to trip a guy, you usually aren't using an asset. There's no implicit bonus to the test just from starting the action, and String Along changes that. Sure, it's once per turn, unfortunately, but it gives you a way to evade that has a built-in plus skill value, and that's just inherently valuable. This is in some ways equivalent to a +1 foot ally. Obviously not in many, it's really only in the first evade attempt of a turn. But in addition, this second line of text, a lot of people look at do not disengage from the enemy as a downside. They haven't played the Winifred decks I've played. It's my takeaway when I hear people say like, oh, why is that a downside? Alert's the downside. This is a benefit. This is for farming people with pickpocketing. If you trip a guy, you don't want to leave him behind you. You want to carry him with you so you can trip him next turn and keep picking his pockets. So the idea here is this draws another card on top of what pickpocketing is getting you, and you're keeping the enemy with you so that you can keep doing it. This is slightly problematic because sometimes you're like, all right, I've got enough resources. I picked enough pockets. This guy doesn't have Hunter. I'll trip him, leave him on the ground, and walk away. However, to that end, you could just, if you really want to get rid of the guy, you just stop stringing him along. You just don't trigger the reaction, right? You don't have to do it. So this is really just a powerful synergy piece for the high foot pickpocketing style of Foot Matters decks. There are decks where you play Foot Matters and you don't have pickpocketing. I personally tend to play decks where pickpocketing's in the deck at first, but not a huge part until I upgrade it, which comes much later, like around the midpoint of the campaign. But I'm very happy that String Along exists. How strong is it? I don't know. 3 resources is a lot. Rogues already have a lot of play actions. There's opportunity cost. You have to cut something from your deck. But this is a card that I'm gonna play with like every time I play Foot Matters until I have a strong opinion on it one way or the other. And it's a card I'm happy to see. I'm glad there's a way to just get passive repetitive skill bumps on my foot test at level 0 in Rogue for once. I'm glad to have extra card draw in my deck. I'm glad to save the re-engage actions, the awkward turns where I don't move because I want to trip the guy again next turn. On the whole, I think String Along is actually a brilliantly designed card, and because of its downsides, because of alert, because you might not want to carry him with you, and because it only works once a turn, I don't think it's like crazy powerful when pushing Foot Matters to an insane degree, but I am hyped about the card and looking forward to playing with it. Next up, we have Crackshot, a practice skill that commits for 3 question marks, but not really, because you can only commit this to a skill test or an ability printed on a firearm or ranged asset you control, so these are actually either fist or foot, depending on what asset we're talking about. I don't know, man. This doesn't need to exist for me. I personally have always been down on cards that just give you reliability temporarily, right? I want reliability all the time. Give me a Swords Tarot every day of the week, right? I'll take +1 fist for the rest of the game, but +3 fist right now, just this once, doesn't really appeal to me. I need to pass all of my tests. There are only so many slots in my deck. I'd rather have a bunch of separate things that all add together and make me succeed every time than a bunch of one-use things where that time I succeed and I can run out of steam. That might just be me personally in terms of deck building. This might be a perfectly fine card, but I just look at this and I think, why do I care about this? Why would I choose to go for this over Unexpected Courage, where I get 1 less icon, but I can commit it to a Mythos test? And Unexpected Courage is a card that I'm always not happy to run. I look at it and I'm like, Unexpected Courage is fine. It's not bad, but surely there's a better card in my deck, right? Surely there is something more valuable than Unexpected Courage. So when I look at a card that I view as almost a strict downgrade to Unexpected Courage, like 1 more fist when you're attacking is not worth the ability to get 2 on a Mythos test. the loss of flexibility to a base core set card. I don't get it, man. Crackshot is just not it. It's personally not the kind of card I go for, but even like trying to step outside of that and view it as like from someone else's perspective, I feel like it compares directly unfavorable to cards that are in the neutral category from 8 years ago, right? Like, I don't know what this is for. Next up, we've had You've Had Worse, a zero cost event, and I will mention the icons because committing for 1 head and 2 foot is actually really good icons for an event, especially in Rogue. It is a favor, fast, play when an investigator at your location or connecting locations without damage and or horror. That investigator may spend up to 3 resources. For each resource spent, that investigator cancels 1 damage or 1 horror, just stealth. This is just a transparently good card. At first, I was really not very hyped about it, and then I was like, actually, this says spend 3 resources to not auto-fail Rotting Remains, and my opinion on it changed very quickly. You've got cards like You Handle This One and Savant that already sort of fill the same niche as this. However, this is, in a way, auto-fail protection against some of the most dangerous Mythos cards in the game. It's also just doing the same thing as those cards in a arguably more flexible way. I think You've Had Worse is just transparently good Mythos mitigation. It's not something I'm super excited for, but I do think it's just obviously a good card, and I'm looking forward to playing it and seeing if my opinions change one way or the other. Going over to the experience version of You've Had Worse at 4 experience, same icons, kind of weird. Now, instead of spending resources, you may give up to 5 resources. And then for each resource given this effect, that investigator cancels 1 damage or horror, just stealth. So in terms of mitigating Mythos cards, the very, very little deals more than 3 in the first place. This 4 experience is not really for Mythos mitigation. You might, once in a campaign, have an opportunity to cancel more than 3 damage, right? The reason you take this is to give your resources to someone else. If you're using it on yourself, I don't think you can give resources to yourself. Can you? I don't know rules clarification. If I take damage, can I give myself resources? I'm guessing it's free if you do it to yourself. So it becomes a sort of economy card. And if you're a big money deck looking to enable a Black Fan, your deck costs a shitload of experience. Who are we joking here? You're not buying this anytime soon. That's the problem, right? If you're buying it as an experience card, it implies you're playing a big money deck, which is already the expensive experience archetype that you don't get into until the mid game, where you buy core cards in sessions 1 and 2, and then you do a big bank up in session 3 or 4, and you do a lot of switches all at once with adaptable to go into big money around session 4. You aren't getting this anytime early if you're playing a big money deck, which is why I'm kind of confused by the point of it, because being able to give someone up to 5 resources only when they fail things and take damage is such a situational support card that while I'm very hyped for You've Had Worse level 0, I view this as binder filler where I'd probably buy Observed instead, even if I was running the level 0 card in a big money deck. Yesterday in the Guardian video, I mentioned repeatedly when talking about the Remington model 1858 that Rogue got a new ally that made Michael far better than any Guardian at being able to repeatedly play as fast actions your new guns. At level 0, that is not what Robert Castaigne, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, I'll just be calling him Robert from now on. I don't know if that's what he does. He's not that great at level 0. He's a 4-cost ally asset with 2 health, 2 meat, and the veteran tag. He gives you +1 fist, so even at level 0, he's still good. And as an action, you discard a firearm asset that takes up 1 or fewer hand slots from your hand and exhaust Robert Castaigne. Resolve a fight ability on the discarding asset, ignoring all cost. This does not provoke attacks of opportunity. So, you know, that's not particularly exciting. This allows you to do fight actions when you have no assets in play, which for Michael McGlen specifically is actually valuable because your weakness might throw away all of your stuff on a turn where you needed it, and now you can discard a gun and shoot a guy who's on top of you, and if that kills him in 1, which, you know, for a lot of low-level enemies it will, then it solves the problem. You can play a different gun out. However, just in general, this level 0 effect is not super compelling. It turns a firearm in your hand into an event, basically, so that is enticing, but it's not particularly incredible. Mostly, this is just good soak, good stat pump, fine ally at level 0. The effect is not niche, but it's not super powerful, at least not in my opinion. I'm open to playing decks and finding out that I'm wrong and this is crazy, but I don't think that's the case. However, pump 4 experience into Robert, he gets to be a lot better. His cost drops down to 3, this ability changes to a lightning bolt, and it does more than that. You exhaust him, you fight, you reveal, not discard the firearm asset in your hand, resolve a fight ability on the revealed asset, ignoring all cost, and then you may either discard the revealed asset to draw a card, which you probably don't want to do because the second part's so insane, just play that asset instead, paying its cost. So you can use Robert Castaigne, reveal the Remington, shoot a guy, play the Remington, shoot him with the Remington's own ability, and then a few turns later, you can use Robert again, reveal a different gun, replace the Remington, and then shoot him with the Remington as the Remington leaves play as well. The 4 experience Robert is a lot like Chuck Fergus, except instead of being for event decks, Robert is for small guns decks, and this guy is massive. We had talked a lot in the Discord before seeing this guy about how exactly you best deal with your weakness when you're playing Michael. Robert just deals with your weakness. Just have enough small guns that you can use Robert to replay a gun if you get your weakness at a bad time. He's an incredibly strong ability, or sorry, an incredibly strong ally. He gives you the stats you need, he gives you action compression, and most importantly on Michael, he gives you the ability to cleanly deal with your weakness, and he has some insane action compression combos with the Remington. The fact that you can get, over the course of 2 turns, 4 extra attacks out of a Robert Remington combo, and yes, putting 2 copies of each in your deck is 16 experience. It should be strong as hell. But a lot of cards cost 4 experience and they aren't strong as hell. Like we just talked about, you've had worse level 4. I was not hyped at all. He's a 4 experience ally that feels like he should be a 4 experience ally. I'm very happy with him. I'm really looking forward to play with him. He is a very hype card. And I'm not as hyped about Watch This, but it is transparently incredible as well. It is a 3 experience upgrade to everyone's favorite rogue skill. And the difference is that now instead of committing for 1 question mark, it commits for 3 question marks. Which, you know, that's nearly promise of power. So it goes from like, maybe you fail on a -4 or a curse cascade to pretty much just on auto fail. The number of times you're able to use this is also just wider. You might find yourself as the fighter with Watch This against like a 3-fist guy, up 3 with a -4 in the bag, a little bit uncomfortable. Or much more often, like there's a Deep Wind Bull, he's got 4 fists, you're only up 2, you really don't want to use Watch This, but you really want the money. There are so many situations where just having the 2 extra question marks makes this a much better thing for gambling. But the bigger upgrade is that, like, screw gambling, I can just use this as promise of power. It's just promise of power with 1 less question mark that costs a resource to commit. That's still a great card. I would spend 3 experience on that. Promise of power shouldn't be at 0. Like, I wouldn't really spend 3 experience on just 3 question marks to anything, but when you combine it into like being fast emergency cash on top of that in most circumstances, yeah, it's just an incredible skill. Am I getting it immediately on anyone? No, probably not. Even in somebody like Winifred, there are just far higher priorities to get, but this is still a very good card later in a campaign when you can afford to upgrade it. Which brings us to rogues as a whole. How am I feeling about them this expansion? Well, honestly with Michael McGlen, my hype from seeing his original stat line has gone down substantially, and a lot of that comes down to just how brutal confiscation feels as a weakness. Additionally, knowing his card pool of firearms, I feel like he's fairly vanilla in terms of what he can do. There's not too much room to branch out and make an interesting Michael deck. You're just gonna be the small guns guy. That's what he does. I say the small guns guy, the guns guy. There'll be like a good build for big guns Michael and a good build for small guns Michael, and you're playing guns Michael, let's not kid ourselves. So just how restricted Michael is into playing this archetype combined with how bad confiscation really is for you in that archetype, my hype's been reined in a lot. Now, that said, I think Michael's gonna be fun and powerful in spite of this. I'm just not as enthused because of the way confiscation sort of makes you build around it. Deck building is a puzzle, right? I enjoy Arkham so often because of the process of deck building and refining and optimizing and making stronger decks out of whatever concept I'm sitting down to do. When the optimization process is how do I get the most out of the gun, that's really fun. When the optimization process is how do I get the least fucked by my signature weakness, that's not fun. I'm not building for a fantasy anymore. I'm not building to refine a concept. Instead, I'm building to get my hands out of the handcuffs the deck starts in, right? I'm not as hyped about Michael entirely because of how I, as a deck builder, view confiscation. If this doesn't bother you, I think Michael's a really cool investigator. For me, though, I'm gonna play Michael. My friends are gonna play Michael. I'm gonna have a good time, but I think he's gonna be a lot like Carson for me. I'm probably gonna play him once, probably. I'm gonna play him once as small guns because I'm hyped about that deck. And I'm gonna watch somebody else play him in big guns. I'm gonna never really feel the need to play him again, unfortunately. Despite that though, I think Michael is set to be strong, and in terms of what else the rogue card pool gets out of that, I think the Luger is a very strong card. I think the upgraded Robert is also insane. There's not a ton going on with it for other rogues though is the problem, because other rogues are so built around dirty fighting, except for specifically Tony. And sure, Tony can play a similar archetype. Why bother? Like, Tony already has a fighting archetype that just kills everything with Switchblade. It's just a different flavor of Tony when applied to Tony, and most other rogues are gonna struggle getting the stuff they need in addition to dirty fighting, I feel. I don't know, Luger's just transparently good. It mostly comes down to card slots, I suppose. When you're looking at adding the Luger to a dirty fighting deck, it's just that you have to cut something for it, and it's so hard to find cuts to fit Luger into a deck that didn't need Luger in the first place. I do think it's a good card, and that's generally my opinion of a lot of rogue cards, where it's like, I'm pretty confident that String Along is transparently good in its archetype of pickpocketing based evasion rogues. However, even in those decks, cutting something for String Along is very hard. Where's the Party fits in the same archetype as String Along. You've Had Worse is just good Mythos mitigation, but then we start getting into cards where Rogue got a lot of stuff this expansion that kind of just feels like chaff to me, things where they didn't quite pan out in terms of power level. I'm hoping I'm wrong about that, but looking at Bum's Rush, for instance, a lot of people tried to convince me I was underselling it. I don't feel it, man. Two resources is not a small amount for an event that does not kill the enemy. I've heard people compare this to Stunning Blow as opposed to Sweeping Kick, but Stunning Blow doesn't cost 2 resources. Stunning Blow, 1 damage and an evade for very good skill check, like that does matter. That's not nothing. It's not a bad card, but it's the opportunity cost thing. Like, who am I putting this in? Presumably I'm putting it in someone designed to kill enemies because I care about dealing 1 damage. I'm not just gonna run this as a 2-cost way of passing a check by a lot for Cigarette Case, right? And if I want to kill enemies, I just don't feel like this does enough enemy kill. I don't feel Bum's Rush. And there are other cards that are much worse in that regard. I don't feel Crackshot. The fact I don't remember Intimidation, I'm like, have I seen this card? Yeah, it's a fist test to shuffle an enemy into the encounter deck. Generally speaking, if I feel confident testing fist against an enemy, I probably just want to kill him instead of spending 3 resources to put him back. There is counterattack possibility here. Intimidation's not pure binder filler the way I've used some cards, because you can use Intimidation against enemies. What are they? It's in the second scenario of At the Mountains of Madness. That's not the name of it. Edge of the Earth. Ice and Death Part 2. And these enemies recur over the course of the campaign, where they're like, you have to parlay them or trip them to deal with them. And being able to shuffle them back instead of just having them be Ancient Evils, there's value in that. Like, there is counterattack potential in Intimidation and in Rogue as a class, thanks to Adaptable, that does matter. But again, it's just like, if that feels like silver lining. That feels a little bit like Cope, where I'm trying to find a good way for the card to be valid. It's not a very strong card. Same with Crackshot. Doppelganger is one of those cards where I was like, no, don't get it at all. And the same thing happened with Obscure. There's a good number of cards where I just did not feel they really succeeded in their goals with the Rogue class in this expansion. And I feel the same way about Mob Connections. I don't remember my original opinion on the card, but at 4 experience, it's exceptional. You have to find it the hard way, and then once you get it, it doesn't even replay the card. I'm spending money to redraw the card and then play it the hard way again. Like, the idea of having a way to recycle your illicit guns is very cool. But I feel like the experience cost, the requirement of drawing your 1 copy in Rogue, the fact that it's still, like, it is an action and 2 resources to get the card back. It's not just something you get to do. There's no action compression. It's all cost. You can build a deck that uses Mob Connections and functions, but I look at it and just think there are better ways to kill guys. There are better ways to get guns, better ways to get bullets. This doesn't feel like it's the way to do it to me. As down as I am on mini cards, I'm higher by far on Robert. He is to Lupara what Dirty Fighting was to the entirety of Rogue Fighters not named Tony. I really like how much he opens up the combat tricks method of juggling guns as an archetype. This is just a really fucking cool card. I'm glad to see it, and I hope there's some sick decks with it. And of course, Gatling Gun's just the best big gun in the game, probably. It's kind of huge here. Let me zoom out a little bit. I don't think Gatling Gun is transparently better than Flamethrower, but I certainly think Gatling Gun and Flamethrower are at a tier of their own compared to every other big gun in the game. This is a cool card. I'm looking forward to seeing people play with it. Which brings us to the Rogue class as a whole. And looking through the cards they got, there's a lot of support for Firearm Rogue. You'd expect that, being the Michael expansion after all. But there's also a good amount of support for other things. This is really helpful for any sort of Foot Matters pickpocketing build. You've got generically good Mythos mitigation like You've Had Worse. You have powerful upgrades to old standbys and Watch This. And yeah, the best new big gun in the game. But on the whole, I don't really feel like Rogue's coming out in any way the winner of this expansion. The best support they got is really dedicated to specifically the guns archetype, which is big enough and expensive enough to not easily mesh with Dirty Fighting, meaning it's largely just for Michael and Tony. The stuff for pickpocketing, I'm excited for. I'm looking forward to trying out Where's the Party and String Along, but again, opportunity cost at this point in the game is fairly massive. That said, when both the cards I in my deck draw cards, I tend to think I'm probably making the deck better. The issue I have with this as general rogue card pool though, is that a lot of rogues are not pickpocketing rogues, and only 2 rogues are ever going to be gun rogues, really. And in terms of general usefulness for the rogue card pool, there's not a ton going on here. I feel like the rogue card pool is not... This isn't pushing rogues in general. And you know what? To be fair, rogues don't need to be pushed in general. I would say that rogues and seekers probably have the strongest options generally available to them, that the rogues who are weak due to their character cards and not their card pool at this point. Do I think that rogues are as good as seekers? My opinions on mystics have been going up a lot recently. I'll worry about that another time. For now, wrapping up with rogues, I am genuinely excited for Michael McGlen. Confiscation reined in my hype from like world-shattering dangerous hype levels to, he'll be fun a couple of times. And some of the other cards are things that I've really wanted to see in the rogue class for a long time. Very genuinely, just because of String Along and Michael, even though Michael's hype has been reined in so much by confiscation, I think I'm pretty excited for the rogue card pool changes. I think Michael's going to be fun. I don't like thinking about confiscation. It really ruins it for me a lot. But he's still, like, he's just dropped from like 11 out of 10, can't fucking wait, to like 7 out of 10, he'll be pretty cool. I just have a habit of overly dwelling on negative things. And then even though most of the card pool support's fairly niche, because of the niche thing being something that I specifically have called out as something I want for so long, even though the card pool as a whole doesn't seem like rogues are coming out as the winner, I'm pretty fucking hyped about String Along coming out. That'll be it for now though. I've been Rather Incoherent. This has been the last of the rogue card spoiler roundup for the Drowned City. If you made it this far, then thank you for your time. If you could hit all the buttons to make the algorithm happy, greatly appreciate that. And a massive thank you to everyone supporting this channel, both over here on YouTube as channel members and on Patreon as patrons. I'll see all of you in the next one.